PowerPlayChess, brought to you in association with Kagi.
Hello and welcome back to round 4 of the Women's Candidates Tournament. This round we saw many tough fights and complicated positions, but only one of them ended in a decisive result. It was the game between Nurgyul Salimova and Humpy Koneru, which is the game that I want to share with you today. It had very unique king movements in the middle game, and there's a lot to learn from this game in terms of both attack and precise defense. Looking at their head-to-head score, Salimova and Koneru have seemingly never played each other before, so this was going to be their first game, and trust me, we are in for a true battle. Salimova, playing as white here, starts with d4, and Koneru replies with knight to f6. c4 followed, and then e6 by Koneru, and so far we will see that we get a classic Catalan opening. Now Koneru plays bishop to e7, followed by bishop g2. Everything is going according to plan for now. But Humpy Koneru has prepared an interesting surprise line to counter the Catalan, and it is knight to e4 here on move 5. This is a very rare move, and it looks like this was Humpy's first time playing this in classical chess. But I looked into this move and I noticed that even though it is way down the list in terms of popularity, it has been played by quite a few grandmasters before. And that is usually a sign that there is something special about this move. So, more usual way to continue for black would be to play castles, and after white castles, black can choose either to go for closed positions with c6 or more open Catalan positions with d takes c4. Both of these are very standard for the Catalan and involve a lot of theory. But instead we get a more unique continuation with knight to e4. Now after white castled, black goes f5. This is the idea of the line. This reminds a bit of the stonewall type of pawn structure. And the knight is very solid here on e4. Now, Salimova continues with b3, just defending the pawn on c4 for now, and allowing this bishop to develop in the future. Black also continues developing with knight c6. We see bishop to a3. This is a good trade offer from Salimova, and without too much thought, Koneru plays bishop to f6, avoiding the trade. And even though capturing the bishop was okay too, I think it was more of a positional decision because this dark-squared bishop is considered to be black's good bishop compared to this one on c8 that is looking into its own pawns. So she avoids the trade very quickly. This might have still been in her preparation, and Salimova plays pawn to e3. At this point she is already thinking, so she didn't expect this line for sure. And it was necessary, this e3 move, because it secures the d4 pawn just in case black was ever going to take and start targeting this pawn on d4. Now, we get to see the whole idea of Humpy Koneru's setup. She cannot castle right now because of this bishop on a3, but maybe she never wanted to in the first place, because here she plays h5, going straight for the attack. Full attacking mode, and surprisingly this is pretty sound for black. They do not have any apparent weaknesses, and it becomes a bit difficult for white to start defending it. Nurgyul stays calm and finds one of the good defensive moves like knight f to d2. But there were a few options to mess up here. For example, if white plays h4, which usually looks logical to close down the king side, but that actually opens things up even more because black has g5 ideas, and if these trades happen, then all of a sudden black's pieces join the attack very quickly, and white king is in big trouble. So this line is still very dangerous and precision is required, so she plays after h5, she plays knight f to d2. Then Humpy continues here with h4, which was the initial plan, opening up the h file. But I really couldn't help but wonder, did black ever have a knight to d4 tactic here. It looks really tempting because you're sacrificing a piece, but you're going to get that rook on a1 in return, almost for sure. But white has a really nice resource here that even though they don't win back the material, they can actually give up this rook on a1, but instead get a really dominating position in the center with knight e4, knight d2, targeting the bishop, and the knight joining. And the idea here is that white is much, much better, if not winning, because of the lack of safety of the black king. It cannot castle here, and the black is also lacking in development by far. So for this reason, this knight d4 tactic didn't work, and both players, I'm sure, saw that, and instead Humpy Koneru goes for h4. Now, Nurgyul trades one of the main attacking pieces, the knight on e4, and after d takes e4, knight c3, completing the development. In such cases, it's usually easy to get distracted by what's going on the king's side and maybe forget about development on the other side of the board, but Salimova made the right choice and did not panic under the attack. She develops the knight, and then after h takes, the h-file is now open, so getting dangerous here for white. Queen to d7, so of course the rook alone cannot make any serious threats, so the queen is trying to join through this queen f7 maneuver all the way to the h-file. Rook to c1, continuing to bring more pieces into the game, and at this point, Salimova finds a very important defensive move. If she keeps doing nothing on the queen side, then once the queen gets to h6, it's going to start to be very serious for white. So this was a very key moment for her to play f3, which is what she found in the game. And this move is good for a few reasons. One of them is that you're making an escape square for the king. And secondly, it's that opening up the center is actually pretty good for white. Because now, after e takes, queen takes, which is what happened in the game, at least the bishop is working, the queen is working, the knight, the pawns can start playing in the center. So it just makes black's center a bit less solid. Humpy Koneru then plays bishop to d7, aiming to castle long, and Nurgyul goes for some counter-attacking moves, which I like. Knight to b5, making a threat onto the c7 pawn. And at this point, of course, we saw that bishop to d7 was with the idea of long castles, but it turns out that long castles doesn't actually work here for black. At this point, you can stop the video and try to find why it doesn't work. This is not what happened in the game, but still a good tactical practice for you. What would you play here for white? Okay, so if you've made your choice, it might not actually be what first comes to mind, because at least to me, the first move that you think about is knight to a7, which looks great at first, but that's actually not the solution. So if knight a7, of course, we would love for the opponent to take on a7 and then deliver a nice checkmate on b7, but they don't have to do that. Black can simply play king to b8, and now the knight has to solve its problem. So the knight taking here is definitely not good because the bishop joins, and then after something like this, queen h5, black's attack is actually really, really strong, and all white did was get a pawn that is not going to matter on the queen side. And if knight to b5, still similar issues. e5 happens, black is just more ready for this in the center and still has these ideas on the h-file, and this would be a better position for black now, and they overtake the initiative. For this reason, this knight to a7 move, which looks really great at first, doesn't work, and the actual move, I'm not sure how many of you would actually see it. I think it's difficult to see initially, but once you see it, it makes sense. The move is bishop to d6. So it's a very nice idea because you're attacking the c7 pawn and black has no way to defend it. They also cannot take our bishop, of course, because of knight to d6 fork. And if not, then we're just going to take the pawn on c7 on the next move. There's a bit of more tricks with the a6 line, But even there, white turns out just fine after knight c7, bishop to e7, and all white has to see is that they can take the bishop and then play this knight to d5 move, a nice save of the knight, because after black takes, we can take back and win back the piece easily, but alongside a really overwhelming attack. Good light squares, the rook is participating, so now black's king is actually in more trouble. So bishop to d6, a pretty great resource and a nice tactical motif to know. Humpy Koneru probably saw this during the game and for this reason did not play long castles, and instead she goes a rook to c8. And now the same bishop d6 idea doesn't work because of king to d8 and the pawn holds. The position is not bad for black at all. The king on d8 is even more safe. So the same idea didn't work, and instead Salimova plays rook c to d1. Now, black is definitely still trying to get to the open h file. Salimova comes back with the knight, and here Humpy Koneru plays king to f7. So both players now have under 10 minutes, so it's really getting dicey, it's getting into time trouble, and we will see what that leads to for the game. Nurgyul plays knight to e2, which is a good move because the knight is needed here to help out in the defense, and another important thing that this knight does is that it protects the d4 pawn, which is important because white wants to play e4 on the next move. So queen to h6 follows and e4 happens now. We're safe to do so because remember why this whole f3 defensive move was important. Now queen h2 is not checkmate. The king can escape to f2, which is why this was necessary earlier. Otherwise, white would be in big trouble with no escape squares. So e4 by Nurgyul. Now this is a counterattack. Now both kings are all of a sudden under pressure. The knight does a great job protecting d4, and we'll see some play in the center now. At this point, Humpy Koneru goes for g5, and she has no intentions to back down from the attack. And for me, this was probably one of the most interesting moments in the game because this is a critical moment for white, especially. How do you think the position is here? Would you rather play for white or for black? And what would you play for white here if you had that option? You can stop the video or just play on and see what happened in the game because the move was amazing. So if you're ready, I can tell you right away that the king f2 was the move, which is what Nurgyul found in the game, and that was the best defensive move available in the position. The real answer is that the position is even slightly better for white, but only after this king to f2 move. Other moves, for example, like e takes f5, don't really work out that well because this opening of the center doesn't give white anything special. And there was another option that I thought was pretty interesting. It was to play e5. So if you looked at that, it's still a move worth considering, but black has a really good resource here with knight takes to e5. And it might seem very strange at first because you just open up this file and take the bishop, but no, black has this in-between move, bishop to c6, and suddenly it is white who has to give up material. And believe it or not, the best line here is to actually go for giving up the queen with e takes f6, bishop takes, rook invades, and after something like this, we're going to win back the bishop on f3, and it's 3 pieces for the queen. Very strange material imbalance and a lot of game left, and it's going to be very unclear. Or white can also do a similar thing with queen to c6, but it's just funny, we don't see this type of imbalance often. So e5 looks nice, but knight to e5 might create some problems for white in that line. So instead, king to f2, amazing move, and as it turns out, it's very hard to continue an attack for black. Queen to h2 now doesn't make any threats because of rook to h1, and opening up the center also opens up the black king. So both kings are kind of in a similar situation here. In the game, Humpy Koneru plays g4 and attacks the queen. The queen retreats, and after f takes to e4, Nurgyul plays king e1, so hiding the king right in the middle of the board. And maybe now it's black's king who has to worry, being on the open f file. So I think I haven't seen this king g1 f2 e1 maneuver at all very often, and the fact that the king ends up pretty safe on e1 is pretty amazing. No checks from black, and as we will see, bishop to e4, and white seems to be completely safe. So black plays queen g5, and the next move here is very important from white, and it shows great understanding of the position by Salimova. Although this bishop has been doing a great job on this diagonal, it is now time to put it somewhere else, onto c1, and reposition it in that way. And the thing here is that the black queen doesn't have that many options, only h5 or a5. So if it goes to h5, knight f4 joins the attack with full force, and something like queen f7, knight g6 is really not a position that you would enjoy for black. So instead, she has to go for queen to a5, which is what happened in the game, and the queen trade is essentially forced. It may seem like this position has calmed down, we have even material, and another draw might be in sight, but no, Salimova was just getting started, and she goes directly for black's weak pawns. Rook to f4, and as it turns out, there's no good way to defend that pawn. e5 is not working because of that same idea with the rook targeting the bishop, and otherwise there's no way to defend it. So black goes for rook to h2 and hides the king on h8, but still, this is one extra pawn, which might not seem like a lot, but it's more about the pieces here. So looking at this position, even though it's just a pawn, but all of black's pieces are tied down. So the rook is attacking this one. These two pawns are attacked by the bishops. So that means that the rook is stuck, the bishop is stuck. These two pieces are not really attacking anything from white, and it's just a very tough position to play. And even black's king is not out of danger yet. So at this point, practically it should be lost for black. Humpy here probably got tired of defending and decided to activate the rook with rook to f8, but this is going to drop a second pawn with bishop to c7, and as we will see, with two extra pawns, Salimova proceeded to win pretty confidently. So it's already winning for white, and I can just show you the end of what happened. She was very technical, trading the pieces, which is a good strategy when you have extra material, and didn't make any slips here. Bishop for knight got traded, but a bishop is usually advantageous in these positions whenever the play is on both sides of the board, and the two pawns ended up being decisive here. Even though a lot of trades happened, but even the black kings still wasn't out of trouble for the whole game. Although, as we saw from the start, it looked like it was white's king who was going to be in trouble for the game. So now we're nearing towards the end. Rook to f7 was the final move of the game. Humpy resigned because king to e8, for example, leads to g7 with eventual promotion from white, or rook f8 and then promotion. So wonderful game by Nurgyul Salimova. She handled complications and time trouble really well, and we have to give her a lot of credit for not getting scared of the dangerous attack carried out by Humpy Koneru, but instead finding good defensive moves and even counterattacking moves. So the other three games of the tournament ended in draws. Gorechkina made a draw with Vaishali, Katerina Lagno made a draw with Tang Zhongyi, despite Lagno having a dominating position up a pawn. And the final game, Anna Muzychuk also made a draw with Lei Tingzhe, where Anna had a massive chance to convert a rook endgame. But even the draws in this tournament were very hard fought and very, very interesting. And overall, I am really excited to see what's going to happen in the upcoming rounds. The players have a free day tomorrow, so we will be back to see the action the day after. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed and hope to see you next time. Bye bye.